The ABC sitcom Bewitched ran for 8 seasons from 1964 to 72. It was a charming tale of a witch attempting to avoid using her powers while enjoying suburban life with her husband Darren. It became a massive success but cost the lives of several major actors. Conspiracy theorists felt the show must be cursed. In this video, we're going to take a look at how every Bewitched cast member met their end. The Bewitched Curse. Several tragic deaths occurred while Bewitched was on the air. Alice Pierce, who played Gladys Kravitz, died at 48 of ovarian cancer in 1966. Marion Lorne, who played Aunt Clara, died at 82 in 1968 of a heart attack. There were several other deaths after the show concluded. 2 actors played Frank Stevens. Roy Roberts died of a heart attack at age 75 in 1975. Robert F. Simon died of a heart attack at age 83 in November of 92. Sandra Gould, who was the other actress who played Gladys Kravitz, died at 82 of complications from heart surgery in 1999. 2 actresses played Louise Tate. Casey Rogers died of a stroke at 80 in July of 2006. Irene Vernon died of an unspecified illness at age 76 in 1998. Paul Lynde played Uncle Arthur and died of a heart attack at age 55 in January 1982. Mabel Albertson played Phyllis Stevens and died of Alzheimer's at the age of 82 in September of 82. Maurice Evans played Maurice and died at 87 of cancer in March of 1989. Alice Ghostly, who played Esmeralda, died at age 81 of colon cancer and a stroke in September of 2007. Rumors of the Bewitched curse flew for decades after it went off the air. Some believe the show's supernatural nature influenced these tragic deaths. The Bewitched curse extended to almost every role, from the star Samantha Stevens to smaller roles like her neighbor Abner Kravitz. Only one young actress has managed to escape it so far. Elizabeth Montgomery. Elizabeth Montgomery was born into stardom. Her mother, Elizabeth Allen, was an actress. Her father was a leading man in several projects in the 30s and later became an acclaimed director. Robert Montgomery put his daughter on his TV Playhouse series, Robert Montgomery Presents, in the 50s. It launched her career, and she went on to appear in over 200 live TV programs in the following decade. Elizabeth Montgomery starred in Bewitched from 1964 to 1967. It was her only series but became a massive hit. Its first season was surpassed only by Bonanza. The showrunners worked her pregnancy into the show in 1966. She had a baby girl named Tabitha. Elizabeth underwent surgery to remove a malignant tumor. She died at age 62 in 1965 in her home with her husband Robert Foxworth and her children beside her. Hey, if you're enjoying this video so far, make sure you give it a like and subscribe to Factsverse if you haven't already. And stick around for more about how Bewitched cast members died. Dick York. Dick York was born September 4, 1928, in Fort Wayne, Indiana. He began working on the radio show That Brewster Boy at age 15. 10 years later, he moved to New York and began working on radio soap operas. He also married his childhood sweetheart, Joan Alt. They had 5 children and remained married until his death. Dick played Samantha's husband, Darren Stevens, on Bewitched from 1964 to 69. No on-screen explanation was given for the eventual replacement. The public came up with several possible explanations, including network and cast disputes. The truth was much more simple and more tragic. Dick injured his back while shooting the 1959 film They Came to Cordura. The pain was so severe he ended up addicted to painkillers. Dick's health became so affected he passed out on set in 1969 and had to be rushed to the hospital. He knew his time on the show was over after that. His only comment on the event was, quote, "5 years as Liz's husband on Bewitched. There are no hard feelings. I just want a chance to do other stage and movie roles." Dick attempted to quit painkillers cold turkey in 1971. His career and economic situation never recovered, and he was forced to rely on welfare, unemployment checks, and odd jobs. His only other acting appearances were small roles in the 80s, including Simon & Simon and Fantasy Island. Dick's family moved to Rockford, Michigan in 1986. He was suffering from emphysema at the time due to his smoking habit. and became reliant on oxygen. He spent his final days working to spread awareness on the issue of homelessness in the U.S., but died February 20, 1992, at age 63. Dick Sargent. Born Richard Stanford Cox, the second Darren took the name Dick Sargent from another artist who originally bore the name. He was born April 19, 1930, to Ruth McNaughton and Colonel Elmer Cox. He attended Menlo Park's Military Academy before entering the arts. Dick began his career with a part in the 1954 film Prisoner of War. He got his big break starring as Stanford Wilson in the 1957 film Bernadine. Dick Sargent was the second actor to take on the role of Darren Stevens in Bewitched. He was cast first but was too busy with other parts at the time. He accepted later in 1969 after Dick York's terminal illness. He took on the role for the final 3 seasons of the show. Allegations about Dick's sexuality flew, and the Star was the first to report it. They claimed he was gay and had a lover for months before. Dick Sargent came out as gay in 1991 on National Coming Out Day. Despite this, he sued the Star for false claims they'd included in their report. Dick later became a gay rights activist and was even the Grand Marshal of the LA Orange County Gay Pride Parade alongside Elizabeth Montgomery. He also participated in their outreach programs that brought relief to developing countries. Dick's last known partner was Albert Williams. They stayed together until his death. He died of prostate cancer in 1994 at age 64. He was first diagnosed in 1989, but only revealed it to close family and friends. Agnes Moorehead. Agnes Moorehead was born December 6, 1990 in Clinton, Massachusetts, to former singer Mary McCauley and clergyman John Henderson Moorehead. She inherited their flair for the dramatic. The family moved to St. Louis when Agnes was 13. She tried out for the St. Louis Municipal Ballet and earned a spot in the choir. Her father supported her ambitions, and she spent the next 4 summers with the St. Louis Opera Company. Agnes majored in biology and acted in campus productions at Muskingum College in New Concord, Ohio. She taught, coached debate, and directed plays at Soldiers Grove, Wisconsin for the next 5 years. She eventually saved enough money to achieve her dream of attending the American Academy of Dramatic Arts, or AADA, in 1926. Agnes wanted to do a TV series before Bewitched aired. She auditioned for Hazel in the show of the same name based on a series of Ted Key cartoons, but lost the role to Shirley Booth. Agnes played Endora on Bewitched. Tales of how she got the part differ. One says the showrunners were having trouble finding an actress to play Endora. They met Agnes and asked her to join right there and then. She somewhat reluctantly agreed. Agnes Moorehead died at age 73, April 30, 1974. Her mother outlived her by 16 years and died at 106 in 1990. Many believe it was Agnes's work on John Wayne's 1956 film The Conqueror that led to her death. The set was near a radioactive bomb testing site. By 1980, 91 of the 220-person crew had been diagnosed with or died from cancer. David White. David White was born in Denver, Colorado on April 4, 1916. His first major acting parts were at the Pasadena Playhouse and Cleveland Playhouse. He served in the Marine Corps during World War II, but eventually went on to Broadway. His first television roles included The Pink Elephant and A Room Full of Roses. His appearance in the 1957 film Sweet Smell of Success helped him break into the industry. He landed the role of Larry Tate on Bewitched in 1964. He appeared in 191 of the show's 254 episodes. He lost his first wife, Mary Welch, in 1958 and his first son, Jonathan, in December of 1988. He died from a heart attack at age 74 in 1990. George Tobias. George Tobias was born in 1901 in New York. He began acting at the Pasadena Playhouse in Pasadena, California. He signed a contract with Warner Brothers in 1939 and appeared in several films in the 40s, like Yankee Doodle Dandy, Sargent York, and This Is the Army. One of George's first TV roles was as Penrose in 8 episodes of ABC's Adventures in Paradise. He later played Abner Kravitz on Bewitched. He retired from acting in 1977 and died of bladder cancer in 1980 at age 78. Erin Murphy. Erin Murphy is the only surviving Bewitched cast member. She played Tabitha, the daughter of the main character Samantha, along with twin sister Diane from 1966 to 72. By season 4, Diane left while Erin took up the part. She says Elizabeth was like family to her and often made her laugh. Erin's now a mother of 6 and continues to act. She starred in the 2007 TV movie Life Interrupted and appeared as Tabitha in a 2019 episode of TV Therapy. She doesn't mind when fans come up to speak to her and says, quote, "I'm thankful people appreciate what I did. I think it's awesome." Francine York shocked Bewitched's audience. There were numerous memorable episodes of the hit sitcom Bewitched, but one of the most memorable is undeniably the one that featured Francine York. It was the 5th episode of the show's 8th season, and it was called Bewitched, Bothered, and Baldoni. In the episode, Samantha and Darren visit Rome. Darren has work to do with his boss Larry Tate, but that doesn't stop him and Samantha from doing a little sightseeing while they're in the venerable Italian city. One of the things they decide to do is visit the National Museum. While there, they get a rude interruption from Samantha's reliably meddlesome mother, Endora. Over the course of Bewitched, Endora had a habit of sticking her nose where it didn't belong. One thing she was always worrying about was whether or not Darren was as faithful to her daughter as it always seemed he was. In the episode, she's particularly worried about Darren's fidelity because she feels her daughter is no match for the bombshell Italian women he's being confronted with. Endora is adamant about proving to her daughter that Darren has wandering eyes, and so she performs a little magic trick. At the National Museum, Endora finds a statue that's meant to depict Venus, the Roman goddess of love. Endora uses her magic to turn the statue to life, and she then sets the now human Venus on Darren. Darren may have no intention of being unfaithful to his supernatural wife, but that doesn't stop him from falling under the spell of Venus's otherworldly charm. In human form, she goes by the name Vanessa. After she turns on the charm, Darren invites the woman back to his and Samantha's villa under the pretense that she can work as their maid. This comes in spite of the fact that the villa in which the couple is staying is fully staffed. Samantha knew Vanessa was up to no good. When Darren brings Vanessa back to their villa, Samantha can immediately sense there's foul play afoot. She knows Vanessa has something to do with her mother, but isn't sure exactly what. She humors Darren's wishes to keep Vanessa on as a maid, understanding that whatever magic is messing with her husband's head is beyond his control. However, she does continue to point out all the ways in which Vanessa fails at her maid duties. The most famous scene from Bewitched, Bothered, and Baldoni was the scene where Samantha and Darren call their new maid Vanessa into the room and she's wearing nothing but an apron. The two are certainly incredibly shocked at the sight, and so is the TV audience. The scene still stands as one of the sultriest moments from Bewitched's run, if not one of the sultriest moments from any TV series of that era. Samantha believes the sight will prove to Darren that Vanessa isn't cut out to be a maid. Darren chalks their new maid's strange wardrobe choice up to experience, to which Samantha replies she's, quote, anything but inexperienced. Samantha eventually figures out what's going on between Darren, Endora, and Vanessa, and she manages to put a stop to the hijinks by the time of the episode's end. Just a few months later, another 8th season Bewitched episode featured a similar plot. The next episode we'll be talking about is the 12th episode, called The 8-Year Itch Witch. Once again, Endora is worried Darren has wandering eyes when it comes to her daughter. In the episode, the worry stems from Endora finding a bunch of pictures of bikini-clad women in Darren's business briefcase. Given that Darren is an advertising executive looking for a sexy new woman to work on a campaign, the presence of the pictures was innocent. Darren was later seduced by Julie Newmar. In the episode, Darren is looking for a beautiful model to play the part of a Catwoman for a new advertising campaign involving a tractor company called Tomcat Tractor. Catching wind of the fact that Darren is looking for a woman with cat-like charms, Endora knows just who to turn to. As a witch, Endora has a feline familiar. This familiar can also happen to transform into a human. The feline is named Ophelia, and none other than Batman's Julie Newmar played her human form in the episode. Julie Newmar played Catwoman on the 1960s Batman series, making this Bewitched episode a perfect crossover between the shows. Ophelia manages to secure the job of being Darren's new Catwoman without much fuss. However, getting the advertising executive to be unfaithful to his wife ends up being a completely different story. At Endora's behest, Ophelia tries her best to woo Darren. After she secures herself the gig as Tomcat Tractor's Catwoman, she demands Darren accompany her on the trip where she'll perform the part. Darren agrees to go, as it's important that the whole thing go off without a hitch. However, Darren has no idea that the real reason Ophelia is inviting him is because she wants to seduce him away from his wife. As this is all going on, Darren is trying his best to make it home from the trip on time so he can have an anniversary dinner with Samantha. Ophelia tries everything she can to keep Darren from going home, but Samantha ends up catching wind of what's going on. Samantha ends up turning the tables on her mother. The 8th season of Bewitched ended up being its last, and the show was relying pretty heavily on guest stars by the end. Francine York and Julie Newmar were two pretty faces who helped keep audiences tuned in, and Francine's apron didn't hurt. Francine York had an interesting life. Francine York's turn on Bewitched ended up being one of the most memorable roles of her career, but there's more to the actress's story. She was born in Minnesota in 1936. Her family moved to Cleveland while she was still young, and there she became first interested in acting. She made her debut in a production of Cinderella put on at her school. She played one of the evil stepsisters. She performed incredibly well in the role and allegedly told her parents immediately afterwards she wanted to be an actress. When Francine was 12, her family moved back to Minnesota. As a teen, she became increasingly involved in dramatic productions at school. She even wrote and directed her own play during high school. She also performed in a variety of local beauty pageants, increasing her confidence. Francine's success in the beauty pageant circuit led to her securing some work as a model, and this is how she first ended up in California. She arrived in San Francisco, where she secured a gig as a showgirl at a popular nightclub. When she wasn't performing on stage as a showgirl or modeling in front of the camera, she was going to acting lessons. In the early 60s, she appeared in a small film production, Secret File Hollywood. How Francine York wound up on Bewitched. Francine caught her big break when comedic performer Jerry Lewis cast her to appear in the film It's Only Money. Jerry enjoyed Francine's performance in the film so much, he cast her in several more things, including The Nutty Professor. Around the same time, Francine graced the screen alongside Marlon Brando in 1964's Bedtime Story, as well as with Elvis Presley in Tickle Me. In 1973, she appeared in a film called The Doll Squad. The film is considered a cult classic nowadays and stands as her most memorable work on the big screen. Though Francine aimed to be a star on the silver screen, she ended up finding the majority of her success on TV. Besides Batman and Bewitched, other notable series that she showed up on during the height of her career include My Favorite Martian, Burke's Law, Perry Mason, Lost in Space, and Matlock. She also had a pretty big role on Days of Our Lives. She continued working until her passing. In her later years, she appeared on TV series like The King of Queens. She also had a memorable role on the big screen in the new millennium, playing the mother of Nicolas Cage's character in the movie The Family Man. She passed away of cancer in 2017. Fans of the sitcom Bewitched might be surprised to learn that leading actress Elizabeth Montgomery started up an affair during the show's production that caused two separate marriages to end. The sitcom was a major success for ABC, allowing the channel to start competing finally with the biggest TV stations of the time. Similarly, the series put Elizabeth on the map as a big star after years of toiling away in Hollywood. Before Bewitched, Elizabeth could be seen in numerous television programs and movies, but none of the roles had brought the actress stardom. With Bewitched, she became a household name. It was third husband Bill Asher who allegedly helped Elizabeth Montgomery get her iconic role on Bewitched. Bill was a producer who stuck his neck out for Elizabeth and helped her land the leading role. Bewitched lasted 8 seasons, with Elizabeth playing the main character throughout the entire run. But two separate actors played her on-screen husband, Darren, over the course of the series. The show is still fondly remembered today thanks to reboots and reruns. Part of what made Bewitched so successful was the loving relationship between main characters Samantha and Darren Stevens. The world fell just as in love with Samantha as Darren did, and it would be hard for TV audiences to imagine the two with anyone else. But not only was Elizabeth married to one of the show's producers, but she was also engaged in an extramarital affair with one of the show's directors later on in its run. While Samantha's marriage to Darren may have been relatively picture perfect, the actress who played Samantha didn't have all that much success with her marriages outside the screen. Producer Bill Asher was Elizabeth's third husband. Her first was a man named Frederick Cameron, who she married in 1954. Sadly, her drive for Hollywood success caused a schism in the marriage early on, and the two divorced only a year into the union. She remarried for the first time in 1956. This was to actor Gig Young. She was still trying to make a name for herself in Hollywood. Gig was a much older man who didn't have any pretense about his and Elizabeth's Hollywood marriage being anything but superficial. They were married for nearly 8 years, and it's been widely speculated that Gig was somewhat abusive to Elizabeth during that time. They divorced in 1963, and Elizabeth went on to marry Bill Asher that same year. In 1964, Bewitched premiered. Following his divorce from Elizabeth, Gig Young went on to remarry twice. In 1978, he killed himself and his fourth wife, who was a man named Kim Schmidt. The two had only been married for a few weeks. Elizabeth divorced third husband Bill Asher as a result of her affair during the production of Bewitched. Following the divorce, she married once more before passing away in 1995. The man Elizabeth Montgomery became involved in an extramarital affair with during the production of Bewitched was Richard Michaels, who had been hired onto the series as a director during its later seasons. Upon Richard's hiring, he hit it off with Elizabeth almost immediately. As filming continued, Elizabeth and Richard started to fall in love, and this love was hard to hide from other people on the set of the series, including Bill Asher. Apparently, it wasn't long into the affair that people on the set began to take notice. As a result, both Samantha and Richard's marriages fell apart. After Richard's wife found out about the affair, she divorced him in 1972. That was the same year Bewitched aired its series finale. The following year, Elizabeth and Bill Asher divorced. The pair had been trying to make it work after Bill Asher initially found out about the affair, but couldn't manage. Bill had been unfaithful to Elizabeth many times prior, having often taken advantage of his industry clout to secure affairs with famous starlets. Magic Spoon is a healthy cereal brand that has helped me reach my health goals. With only 140 calories per serving, I can have a sweet treat without the sugar crash. There are 0 grams of sugar, 13 to 14 grams of protein, and only 4 net grams of carbs in each serving. Click the link below to get some Magic Spoon cereal today. You can build your very own variety box and use my code FACTSVERSE for $5 off. You can choose from the best-selling cocoa, fruity, frosted, peanut butter, cookies and cream, and maple waffle flavors. Plus, there are other awesome flavors, including blueberry and cinnamon. And Magic Spoon is so confident in their product, it's backed with a 100% happiness guarantee. If you don't like it for any reason, they'll refund your money, no questions asked. So, click the link below and use the code FACTSVERSE for $5 off, or go to magicspoon.com/FACTSVERSE to save $5 off your order today. Elizabeth and Bill were married for around 9 years, over which time Bill was certainly more unfaithful to Elizabeth than she was to him. But Bill never fell in love with any of the other women he had been sleeping with. It was the serious and personal nature of Elizabeth's affection for Richard Michaels that ended up causing damage to the marriage, as Bill couldn't stand to see his wife in love with another man. Although Elizabeth and Richard fell madly in love with each other, they never ended up marrying after divorcing their respective spouses. Instead, Elizabeth went on to marry someone else before her death in 1995. It's been claimed that Bill Asher remained in love with Elizabeth for the rest of his life. Elizabeth certainly had a way of charming the men around her, with Richard and her 4 husbands being far from the only notable men she was romantically involved with. Over the course of her life, she was involved with major celebrities like Elvis Presley and Dean Martin. Still, neither of these celebrities became quite so smitten with Elizabeth as Bill Asher was. Prior to his death in 2012 at age 90, Bill expressed his belief that everything bad that had happened during his marriage to Elizabeth was his fault. Although Bill had been older than Elizabeth, it was Elizabeth who ended up passing away first. She died from colon cancer in 1995, which she'd been diagnosed with only a few months prior. At the time of her death, she was 62. Her 4th husband, a younger actor named Robert Foxworth, survived her. They had tied the knot a few years prior in 1993. When Elizabeth decided to become an actress, she was following in the footsteps of both of her parents. Her mother was a notable Broadway actress named Elizabeth Daniel Bryan, while her father had been the even more prominent actor Robert Montgomery. Robert was never very encouraging of young Elizabeth choosing to follow in his footsteps, and he became outright jealous when his daughter became more successful than him with her new show. Some say Robert Montgomery's neglect of his daughter is what caused her to seek romantic relationships with older men during her adulthood. Robert himself feared Elizabeth was trying to replace him, though it seems she never had very much success doing that. Beyond Robert being jealous of his daughter's Hollywood success, some have also suspected Robert held a grudge against young Elizabeth as a result of the death of his firstborn daughter when she was only an infant. Robert had an infant daughter that died before Elizabeth was born, and some think he held a grudge against her for surviving while the firstborn did not. Elizabeth Montgomery mothered 3 children of her own, and it's been said she didn't much enjoy these children being around her father. Many wondered why this was so, as it seemed as if Robert Montgomery was a stand-up citizen without much to hide. However, Elizabeth later shared that she didn't want her children to grow up around as cold and unloving of a figure as she had. Elizabeth's last stand. While Elizabeth Montgomery was certainly appreciative of Bewitched and all it did for her career and her life, at a certain point she was over it. She actually tried to quit after 5 seasons of the hit show, but ABC wasn't about to let go of a huge moneymaker like Bewitched. They offered Montgomery a lavish amount of money to stay on, and she agreed. She kept at it for 3 more full seasons, with the show ending after its 8th, but that didn't mean she was psyched to go to work every day by the end. Montgomery was itching to move on to new and more exciting projects. She felt stifled by Bewitched since she played the same character in more or less the same settings week after week. As such, she began to rebel slightly. This came in the form of not wearing a bra on camera in the 8th season. Montgomery later admitted it was not only to show her discontent with still having to do the show, but also as a nod to the feminist movement. Despite their star clearly being ready to jump ship, the network tried the same strategy after the 8th season, offering Montgomery an even more exorbitant sum. But this time, Montgomery turned it down. And in the years after the show was canceled, this decision proved financially correct for her. That's because she owned 20% of the show's revenue. So as it went into syndication, she made millions in residuals. Bewitched and feminism. While it's a lot more common these days to see female characters on TV and in movies who have strength, power, agency, and more, it was quite rare back in the days when Bewitched was on the air. As such, it can be argued that Bewitched was an important show for the feminist movement. In her book, Culture and the Sitcom, Student Essays, author Isabel Jeffrey makes the argument that the show makes bold statements not only about gender roles, but about the expectations of society for women and the patriarchy that inhibits them. She points out that Bewitched was a female-centric sitcom where nearly all the female characters have strength. This was certainly a rarity. And yes, perhaps it was due to the fact that it dealt with magical realism, so the writers and producers felt less pressure to stick to the norms of 1960s gender roles. But regardless, the show had several female characters like Samantha, Endora, and Serena who portrayed strength and agency that exceeded that of most of sitcom females. Jeffrey even points out that Tabitha, Samantha's daughter, who appears later on in the series, is given powers right away. This makes her immediately more powerful than all the males on the series. And a strong feminist ideal was displayed with the way Montgomery's Samantha treated Tabitha. Rather than being told to be ashamed of being different and more powerful, Tabitha is encouraged by her mom to take pride in who she is and embrace her powers. With these elements in mind, Jeffrey says the show's great power is that it invites a legit conversation about female issues and empowerment. And that's not something that can be said about many shows of the era. With inflation and the increasing cost of living, it's difficult to stay on budget to save for retirement. Having some extra guidance with budgets can help, and that's where Rocket Money comes in. Rocket Money is an all-in-one finance platform that helps you save more and spend less. The personal finance manager allows you to manage subscriptions, lower bills, monitor your credit score, and build your savings all in one place. Rocket Money can see if you have recurring charges for subscriptions you forgot about. From there, they cancel unwanted subscriptions for you with just a tap. You never have to get on the phone or try to hunt down the cancel button. Inside the platform, you can set budgets and monitor your spending for those categories. If you go over budget, you'll get friendly notifications that help you stay on track. You can also monitor your credit score. With complete access to your credit reports and history, Rocket Money alerts you of important changes that impact your score and offers you insights on ways to improve it. Rocket Money is trusted by 3.4 million members and counting. To try it out for free today and unlock more features with premium, head to rocketmoney.com/factsfirst or click the link in the video description. Activism and charitable work. Elizabeth Montgomery certainly left her mark on the world of TV, but it could be argued that she left an even larger one in the worlds of political activism and charitable work. She was known for being a champion of left-leaning political causes and worked tirelessly to help them. And unlike some celebs who simply lend out their name for a cause but don't do actual work, Montgomery liked to put her blood, sweat, and tears into causes she held dear. She donated money and gave a ton of her energy and time to various causes that were important to her. These included women's rights, gay rights, and outreach to disabled people. She had a particular passion for spreading awareness of AIDS and promoting research for it. In 1992, Montgomery was one of the Grand Marshals for the LA Gay Pride Parade. Montgomery was a fierce opponent of the Vietnam War and continued to speak out against transgressions of the U.S. government throughout the years. She offered her talents as a voiceover artist for 2 documentaries that were harsh assessments of U.S. foreign policy. One was called Cover Up Behind the Iran-Contra Affair, released in 1988. The other was its sequel, which was released in 92 and called The Panama Deception. The latter won an Academy Award. Her charitable work was just as important to her, especially as she neared the end of her life. Though she died in 1995, she was hard at work in 94 with various charities. That year, for example, she produced a handful of PSAs promoting Learning Ally, a nonprofit that created recordings of educational books designed specifically for the disabled community. She also volunteered with the organization and lent her voice to one of their recordings, a version of the 1952 best-selling poetry book When We Were Very Young by A.A. Milne. Now let's talk about some other interesting facts about Elizabeth Montgomery. She accidentally created a Samantha boom. The name Samantha wasn't all that popular in the era when Bewitched was first put on the air, but the show was so successful and Montgomery was such a popular actress that her character's name suddenly became hugely common as a name given to babies. So if your name is Samantha, there's a decent chance you can thank Elizabeth Montgomery and the makers of Bewitched for that. She was nearly in a Hitchcock movie. One of Montgomery's early roles was in an episode of Alfred Hitchcock Presents, and while we obviously know her as a comedy powerhouse, her performance for the legendary director showed how versatile of a talent she was. In fact, Hitchcock was so thrilled by her performance, he wanted her to play a part in his upcoming film, Marnie. She was to play the sister-in-law of Sean Connery's character. Montgomery probably would have liked to have done it too, but unfortunately she was unavailable due to a scheduling conflict, so Hitchcock had to search elsewhere, and the part eventually went to actress Diane Baker. She has several connections to Lizzie Borden. After playing a wholesome and magical character on Bewitched for so long, Montgomery looked to branch out in her post-Bewitched career. Right away, she played 2 roles that were decidedly unlike Samantha Stevens. The first was as a rape victim in 1974's A Case of Rape. This was certainly a dark departure from the lighter fare of Bewitched. For her effort, she got an Emmy Award nomination. She leaned into this experience by next taking on the role of accused murderer Lizzie Borden. This was in The Legend of Lizzie Borden in 1975. She shined in the role, earning yet another Emmy nod for it. However, her connection to Borden went beyond portraying her in a movie. After Montgomery's death, a genealogist traced back Montgomery's family tree and discovered she and Lizzie Borden were related. It was distant, the 2 were 6th cousins, but still a remarkable coincidence. Her famous nose twitch. One of the most famous aspects of Bewitched was the slight nose and lip twitch Samantha did whenever she worked her magic. Accompanied by a slight bell melody, the twitch would indicate to the audience that she was about to fix a problem that could only be fixed with a paranormal skill set. And yet, it wasn't simply something the writers came up with on a whim. Montgomery's real-life husband was Bewitched producer William Asher. Asher had previously noticed that Montgomery did this exact nose and lip twitch whenever she was nervous about something. He found it so intriguing and endearing, he worked it into the show. She's part of the Salem witch lore. Even though Montgomery's character of Samantha was a sitcom witch, she somehow managed to become part of witch-based American lore. As we remember, the Salem witch trials were a horrible incident in early American history when women in the small Massachusetts town were unfairly accused of being witches, and some were even put to death. The incident was so infamous it spawned the phrase witch hunt. However, nowadays the Salem witch trials are often thought of in a lighter sense, and the town itself has embraced its part in the scandalous time, and its witch-based decorations, themes, and tours draw a ton of visitors every year. It was in the spirit of this take on Salem and witches that led to a bronze statue of Samantha Stevens being erected there. The statue went up in 2005, and visitors can pay tribute to a fake witch being honored among real fake witches. How Bewitched came to be. Bewitched first hit TV screens September 17, 1964. We were introduced to Darren and Samantha Stevens. Darren Stevens, first played by Dick York and later by Dick Sargent, was the typical suburban American husband, who audiences were already used to seeing. But what made the show unique was Samantha Stevens, who wasn't quite the typical suburban American housewife. She was a witch who often had to keep her magical powers a secret from everyone else. This unique backstory had been attempted a few times before. The show's creator, Saul Sachs, had several inspirations for the show. He was inspired by the film I Married a Witch and the film and play Bell, Book, and Candle. These works dealt with seemingly ordinary humans who possessed supernatural and magical powers. One of the biggest challenges the show's creators had to contend with was when Dick York left the show. Dick had felt exhausted as the show became more popular. The cast was expected to work around the clock, seeing as it was one of America's most popular sitcoms. This took a major toll on his well-being. During production of the 5th season, he suffered a very high temperature. He continued to work and ended up in the hospital due to his ill health. He had to step away from the show to focus on his health. Dick Sargent replaced him as Darren Stevens for the rest of the series. The character replacement was unusual for the time, but audiences didn't mind, and the show carried on. Dick Sargent played the role from seasons 6 to 8. Hey, if you're enjoying this video so far, be sure to give it a like, and subscribe to Factsverse if you haven't already. And stick around for the final scene of Bewitched. The truth, nothing but the truth, so help me Sam. While audiences seemed to love Bewitched until the end, it seems it couldn't compete with other great sitcoms of the time. By the end of the 6th season, ratings were low, and it was clear the show couldn't go on in this case. But the studio had agreed to allow it to continue for final 2 seasons. It was rumored that a 9th season was planned, though this didn't come to fruition. The show had to end somehow, and in such situations, a show's creator should come up with an enticing series finale. Unfortunately, that wasn't the case for Bewitched. Elizabeth Montgomery had also become tired of playing the role and wanted to move on. At the same time, it was unusual in those days for creators to know if their shows would get renewed for another season. As such, the show didn't need to come to a definitive end. An ordinary episode with an ordinary story would suffice. So what was the scene that took Bewitched off the air? Rather than a single scene, it was the realization that the final episode was a thinly disguised remake of a previous episode. In the final episode, titled The Truth, Nothing But the Truth, So Help Me Sam, Endora gives Darren a pin that forces him to always tell the truth. It was a remake of an episode that aired in 1965 called Speak the Truth. After 7 years, it seemed the studio hoped audiences had forgotten about the previous episode and wouldn't recognize the blatant reworking of an old story. The story is supposed to expose whether Darren was truly committed to Samantha. As the show lasted for 8 seasons and 250 episodes, it was clear he was. One of the notable features of this final episode is that it featured Sarah Seeger, who had made a few guest appearances before. Sadly, this wasn't the episode fans wanted to see. By this time, the show had lost its initial charm, and this final episode didn't match up to the quality of previous episodes from earlier seasons. As such, it wasn't a particular scene, but an entire episode that took Bewitched off the air. But with the constant low ratings, it was clear the show's time had come. No longer Bewitched. While Elizabeth Montgomery is best remembered for her role as Samantha Stevens, she had a love-hate relationship with acting. Following her role on Bewitched, she became very selective with her choice of roles, and didn't want to commit to such a long TV series again. She focused mainly on acting in TV movies for the rest of her career. But she was a shrewd entrepreneur in addition to her acting. She owned 20% of Bewitched and earned royalties from the show whenever it aired for the remainder of her life. This financial security gave her the freedom to be more selective with her roles. She reportedly didn't always enjoy working with Dick York, who was in love with her, but she didn't feel the same way as their on-screen characters. She originally wanted to quit the show following the 5th season, but the offer of more money is what kept her for the remaining seasons. Perhaps the lack of enthusiasm on set from the cast and crew is what caused the show's popularity to fade. Elizabeth Montgomery was married to Bill Asher, who was the producer of the show. As Bewitched had been a financial success, it was entirely understandable he wanted the show to go for as long as possible. And as far as fantasy sitcoms were concerned, it was the longest-running sitcom of its time. While Dick Sargent loved the role and was happy to take over from Dick York, it seemed that by the mid-70s, the creators and audiences were no longer bewitched. The legacy of Bewitched. Despite the popularity waning after the 5th and 6th season, there was an audience for Bewitched until the end. The show's cancellation was abrupt, but one wonders if a 9th season would have succeeded. Nevertheless, it remains one of the more popular American sitcoms of all time. The show became part of the American lexicon. For example, the nosy neighbor Gladys Kravitz had such an impact that the very name Gladys Kravitz became a euphemism for someone who doesn't mind their own business. This occurred even though the actual Gladys Kravitz was a relatively minor character. It was one of the first TV shows to make the transition from being shot in black and white to color. The change occurred with Season 2, Episode 38. The show received several Primetime Emmy nominations and won 3 awards. Bill Asher won an Emmy for his direction of the show in 1966. That same year, Alice Pierce won an award for Best Actress in a Supporting Role. Marion Lauren won an award for Best Actress in a Supporting Role for her role as Aunt Clara in 1968. The show is often written about as one of America's most beloved sitcoms of all time. It remains a classic show still loved by older generations and continues to be discovered by new generations. Many different jobs. When the final episode of Bewitched aired in 1972, Erin was just 9 years old, but she was all too eager to get in front of the camera once again. By the time she reached junior high, she had already appeared in over 80 commercials. While in high school, she was head cheerleader and homecoming queen. She also did some modeling when she had time. Murphy got consistently good marks in school and was in the top 10% of her class. After she graduated from El Toro High School in Lake Forest, California, she set out determined and motivated to make a name for herself. She wanted the best out of life, and she had the intelligence and experience to pull it off. Murphy's expertise isn't isolated to one field. She's a bit of a Jill of all trades. She has a wide array of talents that helped her find success in various realms early on in her life. For example, she sold cosmetics, worked as a makeup artist, recruited new talent as a casting director, designed fashion, taught acting classes, hosted a karaoke club, and gave motivational speeches at high-profile events. She certainly wasn't just sitting around twiddling her thumbs. She shared a bit of her life story with the Tolucan Times, a community paper in the Toluca Lake area of LA. In that interview, she highlighted some of the motivating factors that propelled her forward while working these various jobs. She expressed she's a big believer that life is short, and you have to throw yourself into it to get the most out of it. She further explained how she feels you have to push yourself and take risks to have an interesting life worth living. Nobody really accomplishes anything spectacular playing it safe all the time. You have to do things that might be a little scary from time to time, but in the end, it's all worth it. For quite some time after finishing high school, Murphy stayed away from the cameras. All her projects were satisfying for her and paid the bills, but seeing as she grew up essentially in front of the camera, she couldn't stay away from the screen very long. Reality TV host. Even though her primary interest was acting in sitcoms, Murphy never regretted the time she spent working as a reality TV correspondent for Fox Reality Channel. She's also worked as a host and correspondent for TV Land, TVgasm.com, and E!, in addition to serving as the on-air moderator for Allergen Medical. In 2006, she appeared on the short-lived NBC game show Identity as one of the 11 strangers that helped the contestants solve trivia questions for cash. That same year, she hosted 1 vs. 100 alongside Bob Saget. In 2008, she appeared on Danny Bonaducci's I Know My Kid's a Star reality show as a celebrity judge. She followed that up with appearances on HGTV's Craft Lab and Over Your Head and Animal Planet's Rumor Has It. Sure, her fans would probably prefer to see her have a comeback on a sitcom, but Murphy has had an active and successful career in the entertainment industry. And for every appearance she's made in front of the camera, she's also spent a significant amount of time working behind the scenes in more production-oriented roles. And you'd be hard-pressed to find a job Murphy couldn't do. In 2008, she actually took her talents to the ring, appearing on CMT's Hulk Hogan's Celebrity Championship Wrestling as a celebrity contestant. Erin's wrestling name was Mistress of Mayhem, aka Mom. In 2010, she was a contestant in the celebrity finale of Season 1 of RuPaul's Drag U. Murphy is also a successful entrepreneur. She co-created a company called Slim Chillers that produces low-calorie vodka-infused popsicles. Her products are available in literally thousands of retail stores across the country, as well as in Australia and China. She also owns and operates another business she calls Erin Murphy Knits, where she sells hand-knit luxury alpaca fashion and handbags made from wool she has harvested from her own alpacas. She describes her products as being softer than cashmere, warmer and lighter than traditional wool, hypoallergenic, and eco-friendly. In 2012, Erin was featured in a photo spread in OK Magazine with 2 of her alpacas at her private ranch in Bell Canyon, California. Her business ventures must be paying off pretty well. Recent estimates put her net worth as around $10 million. That's a significant chunk of change for a former child star. In 2018, Variety magazine reported she had purchased a $2.5 million beachfront home in Malibu. Not too shabby, Tabitha. By the way, if you're enjoying this video so far, give it a like and subscribe to our channel. Make sure you stick around for the rest of the video to find out if Murphy has any plans of making a return to the sitcom world.
Murphy, and you would probably know me from
Theater and activism. Early on in her acting career, Murphy decided she had little to no desire to do theater. But as fate would have it, she'd change her mind on that later in life. In 2016, she took her desire to act to a local LA theater where she performed in a play called Dead Pilots Society. She's actively involved in numerous charity and activist causes. She supports AIDS awareness, Meals on Wheels, cancer research, and has spoken up against bullying through numerous motivational seminars she's hosted. In the aftermath of Hurricane Katrina, she raised a great deal of money to help those who had been displaced by the storm. The cause closest to her heart is autism advocacy. One of her 6 children was diagnosed with autism when they were still very young. She's been actively raising awareness for the cause ever since. She had taken part in raising awareness for autism, but after her son Parker was diagnosed with it, she made it her primary focus. She regularly attends autism walks and marathons, she volunteers, and she speaks at events to support other parents. A portion of the proceeds from her businesses also goes to autism research. She's hinted at returning to television. Murphy has recently hinted she might make a return to the world of TV. In 2017, she starred in a short film called I Might Be Famous and a made-for-TV movie called Life Interrupted. Granted, neither project drew a lot of attention, but it's still a sign she isn't completely out of the game. She told ABC News a few years ago she never wanted to be complacent. So who knows, and we're excited to see what projects Murphy might work on in the future. She's been dealing with the pandemic just like all of us. 2020 was a difficult year for pretty much everyone. Murphy's been dealing with the coronavirus pandemic and lockdowns just like everyone else. She told Fox back in April she's been doing a lot of cooking, cleaning, and has been homeschooling her kids. To pass the time, she and her family have been playing lots of board games. She mentioned that Rummikub and A to Z are her personal favorites. She and her family have also been engaging in regular Zoom dinner parties with her friends as often as they can. She's also taken some time to enroll in online workout classes and goes out on long walks with her dog every day. In addition to cooking, blasting music, and dancing around her waterfront house, she's also dusted off her old Nintendo Wii and has been playing Wii Sports Resort to pass the time. In 2019, she reprised her role of Tabitha in the YouTube series TV Therapy. The show features a different classic TV character each episode, unloading their past and current baggage on Dr. Steven Nielsen's therapy sofa. Agnes Moorehead's early life and career. Agnes Moorehead was born December 6, 1900 in Clinton, Massachusetts. From a young age, she developed an interest in performing. Her father, a clergyman, instilled an interest in religion for Agnes at a young age. At age 3, she recited the Lord's Prayer in front of her church congregation. She must have made quite an impression on the congregation, as she'd been bitten by the acting bug at that very moment. As she grew older, she also learned the art of mimicry, and would often do impressions of her father's parishioners and other members of her family. She was slowly honing her acting skills, hoping to become a professional actress one day. She also performed in operas, performing with the St. Louis Municipal Opera Company. She attended Muskingum College and majored in biology. However, she acted in several college plays, never losing interest in acting. She moved with her family to Wisconsin upon graduating and worked as a public school teacher for 5 years. During this time, she studied at the University of Wisconsin and received a master's degree in English. She then pursued further studies at the American Academy of Dramatic Art. While teaching financially sustained her, she was eager to become a professional actor. She eventually quit her job to pursue acting full-time. Her early years were a huge struggle. She occasionally found bit parts in small plays, but even these gigs were hard to come by. She often spent days on end without work or pay, and even went hungry for several days in a row. Before we tell you more about Agnes Moorehead's life and career, be sure to give this video a like and subscribe to Factsverse if you haven't already. Theater and radio. In 1937, Agnes joined the theater troupe Mercury Players, run by Orson Welles. She appeared in some of his plays, but found her early successes with his radio productions. A brief mention should be made about her theater career, however. She spent much of her early career as an understudy in plays such as Courage, Soldiers and Women, and All the King's Horses. She had bigger roles in plays like Don Juan in Hell, The Pink Jungle, High Spirits, and Gigi. Beginning in 1954, she toured the country with her one-woman show on an on-and-off basis for 20 years. The show was called An Evening with Agnes Moorehead, but was sometimes billed as The Fabulous Redhead or Come Closer, I'll Give You an Earful. Her early radio gigs included work in productions such as Believe It or Not, Sherlock Holmes, Evenings in Paris, and The Gumps. One of her biggest successes in her radio career was in the production of The March of Time, in which she played Eleanor Roosevelt, and won praise for her performance. She had lots of success as part of the ensemble with the Mercury Players, and through this group developed a close relationship with Orson Welles, who would eventually help her launch her film career. Her final radio performance was in the series Suspense in 1960. She'd appeared several times in the series since her debut in 1942. She was such a popular performer through the show that she earned the moniker the First Lady of Suspense. Agnes honed her acting skills through theater and radio. When she began her career, these were really the only mediums available for entertainers to reach a wide audience. But as she grew in popularity, so were two new mediums, film and TV. One of the reasons she's remembered as an icon of American entertainment was her ability to give versatile performances in 4 different mediums. Film and television. Agnes Moorehead made her film debut in 1941 in Citizen Kane, written, directed, and starring Orson Welles. She had a small role in the film as Charles Foster Kane's mother. But this small role remains one of the most memorable roles in the film, which is now considered one of the greatest films of all time. The following year, she appeared in The Magnificent Ambersons, also directed by Welles. For this role, she received an Academy Award nomination. While she may have been new to cinema, she certainly wasn't new to acting. Her years of working in theater and radio prepared her for an acting career in film and TV. In 1944, she played the role of Baroness Aspasia Conti in Mrs. Parkington, for which she won a Golden Globe for Best Supporting Actress, and was nominated for an Academy Award. She continued to act in lead and supporting roles in feature films throughout the 40s and 50s, and soon became Hollywood royalty. Her famous roles included performances in films like Johnny Belinda, Without Honors, Showboat, Magnificent Obsession, Meet Me in Las Vegas, and The Tempest. Her career film slowed down in the 60s and the 70s until her death in 74. Her notable films from these decades included Jessica, How the West Was Won, The Singing Nun, and Charlotte's Web. Her final film role was in the TV movie Rex Harrison Presents Stories of Love. She began her TV career in the early 50s. She made occasional appearances in popular shows like The Colgate Comedy Hour, Wagon Train, Rawhide, The Rifleman, The Lone Ranger, and Marcus Welby, MD. But of course, her most famous TV role was as Endora in Bewitched, and yet Agnes Moorehead hated her role on Bewitched. Agnes and Endora. In 1964, Agnes was cast in the supporting role of Endora on the sitcom Bewitched. She played this role for 146 episodes from 1964 to 1972. For many fans, her performance as Endora is her best role. Yet Agnes wasn't originally interested in playing Endora. She had auditioned for the lead role of Hazel, which eventually went to Elizabeth Montgomery. After being rejected from it, Agnes moved on. But one day, she was stopped by Elizabeth Montgomery and her husband Bill, who produced the show. They explained to Agnes that they still hadn't found someone to play Endora, the overbearing mother in the sitcom. They asked Agnes if she was interested. She said maybe, maybe not. But when she was offered the role in the pilot, she decided to take it. She felt the role was beneath her and didn't particularly enjoy working on the pilot. But as it happened, the pilot became a huge hit, and Bewitched became one of the longest-running American sitcoms of its time. Agnes wasn't particularly passionate about Bewitched, but she was contractually obligated to work on the role, and she stuck with it. While it wasn't one of her most favorite performances, she did build a strong relationship with Elizabeth Montgomery, and she's still remembered to this day as Endora. It was known to many people that Agnes didn't care for the role, but her professionalism was unparalleled, and her colleagues were impressed at how well she could deliver her lines and create an endearing character even though she hated the role. She died April 30th, 1974 in Rochester, Minnesota. She was 73 and died of uterine cancer. Bewitched was a popular sitcom that ran from 1964 to 72 on ABC. It followed the exploits of an everyday man who fell in love with a witch. The two became married and supernatural hijinks ensued. The husband was Darren Stevens, who was played by two different actors over the course of the show's run. He was played by Dick York during the first several seasons and played by Dick Sargent during the final 3. The lovable witch was Samantha, played by actress Elizabeth Montgomery. While Bewitched was at the peak of its popularity, another ABC show began taking over the airwaves. This was 1966's Batman, a campy TV series based on the comic book character of the same name. The series starred Adam West as the titular character and Burt Ward as his sidekick, Robin. In addition to these two, many other actors and actresses made appearances as the various villains that the duo would face. One of the most memorable villains that Batman and Robin faced on the show was Catwoman. Although the character of Catwoman was later taken over by actress Eartha Kitt, Julie Newmar became known as the character during the show's early seasons. And Julie is the one responsible for designing the character's iconic costume, which now sits, amongst other pieces, at the Smithsonian Institute. During the final season of Bewitched, Julie Newmar made an appearance that made reference to her previous role as Catwoman. Batman had long since aired its final episode without Julie, and Bewitched was on its way out. Ratings were dropping for Bewitched, and the writers were turning to notable guest stars as a way to help bring in the fans for the final episodes. They wrote a role just for Julie, and her appearance made good on her cat-like appeal. The Bewitched episode that Julie appeared on focused on a plot by Samantha's mother, Endora, to find out if Darren is attracted to other women. Darren works in the advertising industry and thus is often in contact with models. After Endora happens upon work-related pictures of bikini models in his briefcase, she expresses her concerns to Samantha. Samantha tells her mother she doesn't believe Darren is interested in any other women. Still, Endora takes it upon herself to be sure, to typically comical results. In order to figure out if Darren is really being faithful to her daughter, Endora enlists the help of one of her old friends in the witch community. Julie Newmar plays this friend, a woman who can literally turn into a cat. Of course, this woman ends up turning out to be the perfect Catwoman for Darren's new advertising campaign, which is centered on a company named Tomcat Tractor. After Darren hires Julie's character to take part in the ad campaign, she then sets about attempting to seduce him. Despite what Endora feared, Darren doesn't prove very easy to seduce, but Julie's character gives it her all. Eventually, Samantha uncovers her mother's plot to try to trick her husband. Samantha then attempts to figure out a clever way to get revenge. Sadly, a lot of people missed out on Julie's Bewitched appearance due to the fact that it occurred during the show's final season. At that point, a lot of audience members had stopped tuning in. Nowadays, Julie's guest appearance stands as an interesting piece of trivia for both Bewitched and Batman fans alike. After her appearance on Bewitched, Julie soon ventured into other areas of business, including fashion and real estate. But she's still best known for her iconic portrayal of Catwoman. Hey, if you're enjoying this video so far, be sure to give it a like and subscribe to Factsverse if you haven't already. Julie Newmar was born August 16, 1933 in LA. She was the oldest of 3 children. Her father was a former professional football player who went on to work as the head of the physical education department at LA City College. Julie's mother had been a dancer, which got Julie interested in entertainment from an early age. When she was young, Julie's interest in her mother's former profession led her to study both classical ballet and dance. She also began taking piano. Julie's adamant studies allowed her to graduate from high school at age 15, at which point she was able to travel for a time around Europe. After returning home to LA, she took up further study at UCLA, where she studied French and philosophy while continuing to practice piano. She also performed ballet with the LA Opera during the time she was studying at UCLA. Julie had plenty of experience dancing on stage before being offered her first role in a film. Her on-screen debut came in 1952 when she was offered a role as a chorus girl in the feature She's Working Her Way Through College. Though the role wasn't much, it led to plenty more roles of a similar stature. After that appearance, Julie made similar appearances as a background dancer in a few other musicals, including the 1953 Fred Astaire feature The Bandwagon. That same year, she made a memorable appearance, covered from head to toe in gold body paint, in the feature Serpent of the Nile. Though Julie wasn't getting much name recognition for these roles, her visage was slowly becoming familiar to those paying attention. Julie finally earned her first credited role in 1954. She was cast as one of the brides in 7 Brides for 7 Brothers. Afterwards, Julie decided she was sick of California and took a trip to New York to pursue a career on Broadway. She made her Broadway debut in 1955, appearing in the play Silk Stockings. However, her breakout role on Broadway proved to be her turn in Lil Abner the following year. Julie also used her time in New York to model for some pinups in magazines. Both as a serious actress and sex symbol, Julie was slowly but surely turning heads in the industry. 1957 saw the actress head back out to California with newfound esteem. There, she was cast in the 1959 film adaptation of Lil Abner. She subsequently traveled back and forth from New York, taking part equally in Hollywood and Broadway productions for a few years. But her true calling soon came in the form of television. She made a notable appearance on The Twilight Zone in 1963 and was given her own science fiction show in 1964. This show was My Living Doll, wherein Julie played an android. Although the show wasn't much of a success, it did lead to Julie being cast in her most successful role to date. Soon after My Living Doll ended, Julie was offered the role of Catwoman on Batman. Although actress Eartha Kitt went on to take over the role by the end of the run, Julie is the one who created the costume, and Julie is arguably the one who remains best known for the role. Despite hopes that Batman would open up more opportunities for her career, Julie didn't act in a whole lot after leaving behind the role of Catwoman. After a 1968 Playboy photo shoot, the actress decided it was time to make a change. In 1970, Julie created her own line of pantyhose and brasiers meant for curvaceous women. Following this venture, she returned to UCLA to study real estate. Her real estate studies led to a successful career. The actress became a successful investor, buying up properties around several notable LA areas. In fact, she's been credited with helping revitalize some of those areas through her investments. Julie is currently 87 years old. In addition to her success in real estate, she has appeared as herself in several films over the past few decades. She's also returned to the role of Catwoman on a few occasions, voicing the character in a couple of direct-to-video animated Batman features. She's only been married once to a man named J. Holt Smith. They married in 1977 and divorced in 1986. They had one son, named John, and he was born in 1981. John was born with Down syndrome and was permanently deafened at the age of 2 after suffering from a bout of meningitis. Although Julie never remarried, she was engaged for a period of time to a subsequent romantic interest, the popular author Louis L'Amour. Julie's on-screen role on Bewitched wasn't the only thing that tied her to that classic supernatural sitcom. She appeared in a Season 4 episode of The Monkees as a character named April Conquest. During the episode, the character's home is shown, and it's the same set that was used for Samantha and Darren's home on Bewitched. Now it's time to hear from you. Comment down below to share who you think is the best Catwoman from the classic show. And before you go, make sure you give this video a like and subscribe to Facts First if you haven't already. Click the bell icon to stay updated on all our latest content.